All right. We have some new revelations in regards to the Bungie mass layoff situation paired with the final shape being delayed. This is an article that just came out from Paul Tassi. It reads new revelations about Destiny 2 declines, Bungie layoffs, and final shape as make or break. Well, that's a spicy title right there for sure, hitting all those SEO keywords there. We have, as I continue to investigate this past week at Bungie and the circumstances that led to mass layoffs and reported delays, I've learned new information to paint a clearer picture. After a lengthy conversation with someone with inside knowledge of the situation, there's new info about how the layoffs happened, staff reaction since then, and the state of Destiny 2 and the final shape. So it looks like someone else that has been laid off is coming forward. Now keep in mind that a lot of people that get laid off, their testimony is usually going to be, negative. No one's going to be like, yay me, I got laid off. But obviously they're giving us some insider information here. So we'll take it with a grain of salt that obviously they signed a strict NDA and they're breaking that, but we'll go ahead and see what they have to say here. Here's additional context to everything that's happened this week and what's potentially ahead. Though of course there are no guarantees with everything in flux now. We have layoffs. Management said other levers were looked at to avoid layoffs. When employees asked if one lever was executive compensation, they were told no and that it would not happen at the company. Very interesting. Next up, we have internally, really no one is blaming Sony for this, even management. Some employees were told that if the Sony buyout did not happen, that the current Destiny 2 performance, the studio itself, would have been in jeopardy if they were still independent. Very interesting information right there. I did not realize that the studio would be in jeopardy without Sony. We have cannot be fully confirmed among every employee, but at least to some, D2 director Joe Blackburn is not really considered to be one of the corporate culprits here for how things went down. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, he's the game director. I don't think that he's making those fiscal decisions. We have the expensive new building was a separate project that likely would not have saved jobs given the context of when that was drafted and when work started. Similarly, the $1.2 billion in employee retention from Sony was spent long ago, often on buying out employees' Bungie shares, which then went to Sony. Interesting. There's nothing left in that pot to avoid layoffs, which wasn't what it was meant for in this late in the transition. Got it. So firstly, the part they're mentioning is that Bungie bought a new building. It's twice the size of their previous building, and that's so that they could develop their new IPs like Marathon, for example. Now, people were criticizing that, saying, well, if you didn't buy this big, flashy new building, then you could have kept all these employees there. But obviously that decision was made well before then. They weren't expecting Lightfall to be such a miss in terms of player retention, which we're about to get to in a moment. Not only that, but they did get those $1.2 billion in shares, and they had to use those to buy the company shares back from the employees or the senior employees, I imagine, that had been there for a long time in order to, give Sony complete control of Bungie so they could have the majority share there. So that makes a lot of sense. The next part we have is the trend line of spending on the game over time made the current year's revenue estimates somewhat logical. So yes, the 45% miss is important and was not necessarily some wildly inflated projection, however nearsighted it ended up being. There has been a real damaging drop post Lightfall in terms of player engagement / spending, and Lightfall sold very well. So Lightfall sold well, so a lot of people bought into Lightfall, but the player retention is not there, which is actually a focal point that has been the reason why Destiny has been successful. The reason why it was sold for $3.6 billion was because it has extremely high player retention. This is something that was mentioned to me when I actually went to a Bungie meeting a long time ago. The Activision executives, believe it or not, said that it was one of their best games because of player retention. So people will log in and play games like Call of Duty for short bursts of time. They log in, play for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it may be. But in Destiny, people's playtime sessions are significantly longer, which is why these, big billion-dollar companies want to buy them and stuff, because it's a very interesting thing. It's a very interesting part of the market that Bungie has captured, but they're losing that now. They're losing player engagement. They're losing player retention, especially in the last year with Lightfall. So definitely sad to see, and hopefully they can come to a fix with that. Next part we have is employees are extremely angry with leadership now and have often communicated that publicly in meetings. Bets were made that did not pay off, but those who made them remain in the company, a fact lost on no one. Now that is a spicy one. So the people that made the bets, or the management, for example, No one was laid off from management that we know of, and that they're still around, even though they're the ones that placed the bets and they're the ones that made those big decisions. So it's an interesting dynamic there where, the captain is effectively not going down with their ship. They're saving their job while at the expense of others. So I think that's a very important note to mention there. And one of the most fair criticisms of this entire situation, I think, is that right there. Moving on to the next part, we have the final shape. Okay, the final shape delay was known by some a couple months ago, really. But it isn't happening late enough where there cannot be a 30th anniversary size drop to split the season, as that took around 8 months to build. There will be something in the season 23 gap though, no specifics, so we're not going to get a 30th anniversary type thing to fill in the gap, but there's going to be something in the middle there. Very interesting. I'm not entirely sure. If I had to guess what it would be, considering we're going into the final shape, we're going into the last year of Destiny history, we want all the players to experience all the things that ever happened in Destiny. So if I had to guess, we're going to see an unvaulting of some big things like maybe the Leviathan raid and stuff like that. If I had to guess, I don't know if we're necessarily going to see an unvaulting of everything, which people have speculated and asked for, but I feel like an unvaulting of some of the bigger, more popular, more desired things is definitely in the works, and I think we'll see that. The next part is they want the final shape not just to be as good as Forsaken or the Taken King, but better. Okay, now listen here, you crackheads at Bungie. There ain't no way it's going to be better than the Taken King, all right? I die on this hill, all right? I've been playing this game since the beginning. The Taken King was literally goated to the level of, like, if you actually look at the statistics and the number of new exotics and new things that happened in the Taken King, it'll blow your mind, because there was like 20 new exotics that dropped in like one day. It was like, we don't even see stuff like that in Destiny 2 ever. Hence the good, not great feedback that will be polished during the delay. It needs to be the best, and it's viewed as the key to turning things around. And that is definitely true. Obviously, people are going to make this out into a meme, basically, where you're talking about the final shape being make or break for the Destiny franchise, which we have been saying this for about a decade now, so it's getting a bit exhausting. I think the definition of insanity, is repeating the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right? The game is not going to be make or break due to the final shape. The final shape will be, I'm sure it will be at least mildly successful at worst. It might be wildly successful. I kind of doubt it at this point in time, but I think that it will be the conclusion to the Light and Darkness saga. It's kind of like when you've watched a bad TV show for really long and you can't stop watching it. For me, that was Smallville. After a few seasons, I was like, this show is terrible. But I kept watching it, and I watched all 10 seasons, and I regretted it later on. But you can't stop watching. Once you started watching the TV show, you can't stop, right? Once you're like a few seasons deep, right? If you've made it this far, you're in season 9 of the Destiny TV show, right? You're not going to skip out. If you made it to season 9 and there's a season 10 and that's the final season, even if it's terrible, you're watching it. You're a part of it, right? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below if you agree or disagree. The next part we have is the final shape campaign and features are reportedly quite solid, even in its current state, ahead of planned future work. Interesting. But they want to go even further, and there's some concern about crunch that can make that happen, even with a delay. Interesting. Well, I think that over delivery is the key here, and I know that crunch creates an unhealthy work environment for Bungie devs and for game devs in general, but we're at the point here where we really need to, it's make or break. Would you rather have, it sounds toxic, and I'm not trying to be toxic, but would you rather have crunch and keep your jobs and keep this franchise alive, or no crunch and be laid off? If those are the two options you have, which is awful to say, by the way, if those are the two options you have, I think for me, it's a pretty easy decision there. Choose crunch, make the game good. But let's go on to the next part. We have Destiny overall. Part of the new PvP strike team was impacted by layoffs, but significant progress has been made on the map pack already, and it should not be canceled. Very nice, I like to hear that. A lot of people were speculating about that. The next part reads, no significant changes have been announced to staff for the longer term future of Destiny 2 plans because of these layoffs and the delay yet. Got it. No known plans to reduce support for D2 below old already planned levels. No new info about the long term or something like Destiny 3, which I did not get the sense was really on the radar. I've said this many times before, we're not getting Destiny 3. They're just going to continuously make Destiny 2. Destiny 3 would actually introduce more problems to the current state of the game, because then all the cool stuff that you've grinded for, the exotics, the weapons, everything, they are all gone, and now Bungie would have to reimagine all new things, and that's just way more difficult than just adding a few new things every season. They would have to reimagine 100 new exotics, 100 new, raids or all this crazy stuff, raids and strikes and encounters and bosses and story and lore and everything. It's like Destiny 3 is such a bad idea. And I see it over and over again. Every time there's a problem in Destiny 2, they say, opt up Destiny 3. That'll fix everything. It's like, that is so bad. That's like saying you get a flat tire on your car, so let's just replace the whole car. It's not good, not a good idea. The next part reads, in-game LFG has been tremendously difficult from a tech perspective and reportedly was announced to the community before the devs themselves. Wow. It is far more complicated than players will understand, even if it seems like it's an obvious thing the game should have. It'll launch, but it's been a tough road. Interesting. This LFG feature has been something we've obviously wanted for a very, very long period of time. LFG has been a necessity for being a Destiny player. So the ability to have it just built in game so you don't have to go to a third-party app or site, Discord, whatever it may be, is actually a really awesome feature. Apparently Bungie is having a really hard time with this though. I imagine part of the issue is going to be in regards to, you know, blocking out certain names, having it actually function really well, because obviously you have to just add this all into an already massive game, but this is definitely something that needs to happen. I don't care how difficult the complications are. This is something that has needed to happen for so long now, and definitely looking forward to that. Next part we have is, there have been many meetings about microtransactions where many devs wanted to reduce them, but they were always given the reply that they are necessary given how expensive Destiny is to operate, and complaints about the new ones don't always reflect reality. Event cards may seem lame, but they sell well, for instance, or you'd be surprised how many people are still buying the oldest expansions that we always say should be free by now. Very interesting. So they're obviously, you know, continuously having these things, these microtransactions and these expensive things in the game for a reason. And obviously you don't have to buy them, which has been my biggest criticism for those out there who complain and are upset by this. You don't have to buy them. I wish that they were sold cheaper so that way more people would buy them, but you know, they're there and they obviously serve their purpose, and they're there to stay, I guess. The next part is, the ultimate goal is very much for Bungie to be a multi-IP studio with multiple games and revenue streams, but even if Marathon is a success, there are likely not plans for some huge mass migration from Destiny team to the Marathon team, abandoning the franchise, which is good because we've seen this previously in the past with a game like Fortnite, where they had their Battle Royale, it became super successful, so they just stopped production on the Save the World side, which was effectively the PvE of the game. They just stopped the PvE side of the game completely and focused everything on PvP because of the success of the Battle Royale. Obviously, that was a good decision for them financially because that ended up making them billions and billions of dollars. And people have worried, you know, what if Marathon is a huge success? What if Bungie would take their Destiny team and put it over onto Marathon? Which I think is pretty silly because obviously Destiny has also made Bungie billions of dollars, and they're not just going to, you know, kill the game just because Marathon is successful. If anything, they're just hire more employees if it's successful. They want to have multiple IPs. The whole point of this plan of having multiple IPs is because it's a better business decision. So that way you have revenue streams coming from multiple different sources. The next part reads, again, all of this seems very self-contained within Bungie, at least in this conversation. Sony and its goals / live service plans rarely come up at all, though I don't know what's happening at the highest levels at this point. Very interesting. The general mood of most remaining at Bungie is one of anger, sadness, and fear. Interesting. Anger over how the layoffs were handled, sadness over who departed, fear that there may be more layoffs to come, and essentially no one feels safe. Got it. Now this part is a bit hard for me to read because while I do think that there could be some sentiment to this, I think it should also just be understood in the game space that layoffs do happen. Like, they just do happen. Epic just laid off like 900 employees. We know that Meta had laid off like a few thousand employees. Google's laid off a bunch of employees. There's just been a ton of layoffs, especially in the game space. This is very common. I don't think that people should be upset too much by it. I know people are like, well, that's their job, that's their livelihood, and I get it, but it's like you kind of signed up for it, you know, like you signed up for a very risky, you know, type of livelihood, and this is the unfortunate circumstances that happen. You do get severance pay, you do get your health insurance, which is why I think a lot of people have overreacted. And I know people will hate this comment. They're like, wow, look how insensitive of you. And I'm like, I'm not trying to be insensitive. I'm just like, if you sign up for something very risky, you understand the risk, you know, like it's a very common thing that happened. You know, the layoffs, it wasn't like exceptionally handled poorly by Bungie. People tried to say that people were laid off in such a bad way. You know, everything that happened from head to toe is exactly how corporations lay people off in general. We just take it a little more sensitive with Bungie or with Destiny, and you know, Twitter just kind of went a little crazy with it. So essentially no one feels safe is unfortunate though. However, there is a lot of faith that some genuinely cool stuff is coming with the final shape that hopefully players will love. That sounds good. Everything seems to point towards the final shape being a make or break moment for Destiny, but yes, it really may be that this time. I didn't hear anything new about what may be the past episodes, which still make it out, but the player base and revenue has to recover, and the new IPs like Marathon will have to deliver. It's an extraordinary tough time for those who lost their jobs, clearly, but for all those who remain, some in the studio believe players actively want them to fail at times with all the negativity, but I don't believe that's true. If the game delivers, it will recover, but the current situation is going to make the road ahead extremely difficult if the goal is to reverse player retention and spending losses. To me, it feels like pinning everything on the final shape is too many eggs in one basket, but we'll see. I've reached out to Bungie for comment and will update if I hear back. So there it is. That's the entire article from Paul Tassi, and a pretty good one, I think, overall. This is obviously a lot of speculation. We have people, within the company giving their testimony, their ideas, and obviously, they're choosing to remain anonymous, so you have to take it with a grain of salt to some degree. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think about this entire situation, about this update? If you're subscribed to the channel, you're going to stay up to date on all the news in Destiny 2, and we're going to help you become an expert in things in Destiny 2, because we cover god rolls, build videos, the meta, everything, you name it, we're covering everything here. This is the Destiny 2 channel right here, so make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, smash that like button, and click on the screen here to watch another video from the channel. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Later.